What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Moto Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Luke Nesler. We come to you each and every week to talk to you about the business of moto. Guests in the industry that have done incredible things, guests in the industry that are building incredible things, and sometimes even special guests from outside the industry that can bring you some incredible knowledge to help you build your moto career. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Moto Marketing Podcast. We got a great show for you today, but before we dive in, just want to remind you guys of some of the folks that support this show. Obviously, be sure to show love and support to RacerX. They're the reason we're able to do this show and bring you these great guests. You can go to racerxonline.com/Moto Marketing. So racerxonline.com/Moto Marketing. I believe right now at the time of this podcast, they've got a really cool giveaway that they're doing. So be sure to go over and check that out. Obviously, our friends at Michelin Bicycle, just Michelin in general, they came out with the new Starcross 6 here recently, and then on the bicycle side, they've got awesome products like the E-Wild, the Wild Enduro, the Force AM2, just a lot of really great tires, whether you're on a regular acoustic bike or an e-bike, or they even have some really cool BMX race tires that I've tried out. There's some other folks, Darkside's tried those out, and that goes well with our guest today. Last but not least, we can't forget our friends at 100%. They're the unprecedented global leader in moto goggles, but they make a lot more than that these days, whether it's mountain bike gear, helmets and protection, sport performance glasses, casual wear, premium t-shirts. They've got something for everybody. They support the sport, so we'd love for you to support them. We've been off for a few weeks, guys. Just a lot of stuff going on, traveling, lining up new guests, and I wanted to bring on somebody that I just enjoy having conversations with. We have a lot in common as far as the sport that we love, and he works for an organization that I've raced within since I was a kid. I was a track director, which that role taught me to fall in love with being an entrepreneur and in business. We have Cody Wilson from USA BMX with us today. He's the director of track operations. You might not race BMX, maybe you do, but BMX it's so prominent in the moto industry. A lot of people transition from BMX to moto. A lot of people go from moto to BMX. A lot of people do it simultaneously. Very similar sports, and USA BMX is doing some really, really exciting and incredible things in the cycling space. And I wanted to bring Cody on just to kind of talk about his journey, getting into the sport, what does he do, and then talk about all the exciting things that USA BMX has going on. So Cody, it's an honor to have you with us today, man. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited to come on. It's been I listen to this podcast every now and then. Obviously, with us, having our friendship over the years, I started listening a little more. So
cool, man. I appreciate that.
Fun to come on here.
Yeah. So Cody and I, full transparency, we officially met a few years ago when my company started doing some work with USA BMX, and we hit it off right away because he learned my background and knew that I grew up racing BMX and ran a track from the time I was a teenager until I started my business in 2012 or 13, and Cody and I have been friends really ever since. And Cody, obviously, if you're in a sport like motocross and supercross, or in a sport like BMX, most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, you're in there as your profession doing things like you're doing because you love the sport. So can you talk to us a little bit about your background? Did you grow up riding bicycles? Did you grow up riding motorcycles? How did you find yourself working in the BMX space?
Yeah, so I long journey kind of in a way, but all two wheels. It's funny, obviously, like every kid, I had a small Huffy, or I think that's what it was back in, early 80s. I was 3-4 years old riding that, but simultaneously, like I was already on motorcycles, 3-wheel. I was, an ATC was my first deal, and, jumped up from there, did some motorcycle stuff as, I got a little 50, and simultaneously I'm out at the BMX track at the time. When I was 5, it was 1985, and I started racing like late 3. I was turning 4 years old, basically. So spent like 4-year-old, 5-year-old, like racing this non-sanctioned BMX track that was ran by like the Firemen's Association. So it was the early days. And I remember a guy, holding the gate up by hand and, dropping all the hand gates. And then I'd spend my weekends either on a motorcycle out in the fields and just doing that. I grew up in the desert in Southern California. So right along the lines of all the other, the moto people, they've really, some of those tracks have been iconic for us. So it started there, and then obviously stayed racing BMX, got out of really riding motorcycles or never really dived into racing any motorcycle stuff, but and then had motorcycles off and on through my entire life, and obviously did the old trail riding and stuff like that, but nothing competitive on that end. And I got super competitive in BMX and went through my whole life really racing BMX. Had a short little stint of trying the regular stuff, soccer and all those things that none of us can really figure out. And then went back to BMX and did that really up until today. It's crazy. In the last 6 months, or really 3 months, I think, more or less, I've been on my bike a little bit more than I have in the past couple of years, but I've never stopped racing. Never stopped practicing, going out to the local tracks. Still do that, just not at the pace that I was in my 20s.
Did you ever get
30s.
into any other forms of cycling, or was it always BMX? Because I know growing up until the last like 3 or 4 years, I considered myself a cyclist, but I never mountain biked, I never road biked, I never did any of that stuff. I was just full-fledged BMX racing, and more recently I've gotten into the other aspects as well as BMX. How about you? Were you all in on just BMX, or did you mountain bike, road bike?
Yeah, I was all in on BMX till about teenage years, 13, 14, 15. I got into downhill mountain biking a little bit, like once I had a car and could, drive that direction and do the downhill mountain bike thing. And then it was somewhere in my 20s as I had a job and started doing my thing. Like I did do a little road biking, no competitive thing, but I did some decent trail riding, hit some trails on road bikes and did the old beach runs in Southern California, like, running those beach trails. And that was probably more for training to be fast at BMX, which is nothing compared to what these guys are doing today to train in BMX. But, even in just the last 15 years, I don't know that what I was doing is even remotely comparable these days. But, I had a long run of going to world championships with the UCI and competing at that level as well. So there was always this, summer time frame of, hey, you got to be at your best shape because you're headed overseas somewhere. For Team USA.
So when I was, and I still compete, I still race. I stopped from about 2015 till probably 2018, and then I started racing again. But when I was really racing and running the track and doing my thing, there was 2 organizations. There was the NBL, which was the body that my track was sanctioned by, and then there was the ABA. And I never got an opportunity to even ride an ABA track. I was not an ABA member. There just really wasn't any of those around us. And then, whether it's politics or just changing of the sport, those 2 became one, and that one went from the ABA to USA BMX. So when did you get involved as far as like, this is my profession, this is my career, I now work in the BMX racing industry? Were you part of the NBL? Were you part of the ABA? Did you come on after USA BMX was a thing? Can you walk us through kind of when you got involved professionally in the sport?
Yeah, so obviously did the normal, went to college thing, did all of that, and then, had a job, but I was still racing all the time. And I was racing more on the NBL national circuit. And through the 90s and 2000s, and that kind of progressed into, I started helping out to some capacity at some of those events. And, then I was asked to, help in registration. I was like logistically asked to help with coming early and doing some of those other tasks. And I think somehow I got like kind of roped into it and didn't really realize I was working. At the time, NBL was very volunteer driven, and some of the older women that were running it. They're going to hear me say that and tell me, "Hey, I'm not old," but they're the best of my mentors. Really, when I look back at it now, like some of those ladies, that were running those events taught me so much, and I still stay in touch with them. Heck, a couple of them are still track operators, so I see them often.
Yeah.
And I think they like somehow made me think I was just going to help them for the day, and 10 years later, I'm still helping them, right? So, that kind of progressed the NBL side, and then I had a passion for, if you knew anything about BMX, ABA was a lot of West Coast like strength, and NBL had some West Coast strength. ABA overall was a much more dominant brand, I guess you could say, in the national series and the way they were operating races. And I was in Southern California, so that was like the ABA hotbed. So I was racing a lot of ABA races, but I was more involved at the national level with NBL, and I was helping them. And it got me this drive to say, hey, we need more tracks out here. And, we put together some info, and I started talking a little more with, at the time, was Bob Tedesco, which had ran the NBL for, the better part of its entire life of the company. And we came up with this concept that, hey, let's try like a West Coast track development guy and see if we can get some traction on opening some new tracks. So I said, hey, I'll do it, and I'll do it cheap because I still got another job. I'm just going to do this and try to make this work. And that's where like the passion in it all started. And then that turned into, hey, you're going to come to some events, and then next thing you know, I'm kind of almost working two jobs. And at the same time, NBL and ABA became the merge in 2011, and BA Anderson and the ABA family were like gracious enough to say, hey, we like what you do out there. You want to come keep doing it for us? There wasn't very many NBL employees that got an olive branch to kind of continue. Wow. And I did. So obviously I jumped on that, and it was really cool, like working on that side of it and jumping in. So I stayed at that capacity. And then it was only about a year later, they said, hey, you want to come to the office full time and really start to gear up and make this a career for you? And like now I'm pushing 30, and I'm like, I don't know really. And thought about it for about a week and said, all right, I'm on my way to Arizona. So, and came to Gilbert, Arizona, and been here ever since 2012. Awesome. And became full-time at USA BMX.
So when I got out of the sport for a little while, and really the timing of it was the way that our track was ran. I ran a really small little track, which eventually became the only track in West Virginia. And really, it taught me business, but it completely burnt me out because it was in a lower income part of a town there really wasn't any high income part of that town to begin with. So it was always really hard to get consistent ridership, and nobody cared more than I did. Sometimes I felt like I was working 40 hours a week to manicure this track and put on the best race I could. And I found myself not riding anymore, but becoming a free, because it was a volunteer position, pretty much a free full-time employee to try to make this thing go. So when I graduated college in 2012, I started a business. And I was kind of burnt out. I was just like, I'm done with it. And I stepped away from it completely until like 2018. And then when I came back, there was no more NBL. There technically, I guess, was no more ABA. The ABA had become USA BMX. And I wanted to get back in. I was still really close friends with a lot of riders that lived in different parts of the United States that were posting about their track. If you know Chris Knowles down in Georgia, very, very close friend of mine. I've known him for years. Got me back into it. But when I came back, it was very different than what I had experienced before. I went to what I assume would have been like an ABA race. I never went to one before. Going to a USA BMX race, immediately I was like, this is different. It was run, and I mean this in a good way, it was run more like a business, and I think that was something that was lacking on the NBL side when I saw it, and I fell back in love with it. And just watching what you guys have done since I got back into the sport and really started paying attention again to recent times today with the new facility, like new compound that you guys have that is just state of the art. It's incredible. Talk to us about some of the things that are going on in the USA BMX world with the new facility, and you guys have a Hall of Fame, and you have a designated track at the corporate offices. Just kind of for those that don't maybe follow that sport as much as moto, fill us in on some of the exciting things going on with USA BMX today.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you identified, hey, MBL was more volunteer based and running events, and ABA felt like a business, right? And that reflects to everything I'm going to say right now, which is, BA, Anderson, and the Anderson family, like they've got this vision for the sport, and it's good to be in a building where everyone shares the same passion, and that really channels to where we got today, which is a unified sanction. We're running the largest events that have ever ran in BMX history in the United States, and our membership base says the same, right?
Yeah.
So we've taken it to that step, and hand in hand, while we're doing all that crazy stuff, we're also been working on relocating the National BMX Hall of Fame, which lived in Chula Vista at the Olympic Training Center in a, it was a small room, but it was a good little display going on, but we had to pack that up, and it's been here in the warehouse kind of sitting. And at the same time, we've been putting bids out, trying to see what city may want to host a nationally sanctioned facility that is just top notch and has everything under the same roof, maybe even including our headquarters. And we did exactly that. So we ended up building a new facility in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It's been the home of the Grands anyway, so it's not like a new place for Tulsa. And Tulsa to USA BMX is basically family. I mean, everyone that's ever been in BMX ends up in Tulsa, Oklahoma for the Grands, but us as staff members, we intimately are involved with the city of Tulsa and everything they're doing, and it just paired perfectly. And in the end, we ended up with a really cool 2-story headquarter building that, we're on a podcast and I can only describe it through words, but yeah, you walk up to this thing and it's
incredible.
It's just crazy. I mean, the first floor has a Hall of Fame museum that, just blows away anything we'd ever thought of. I mean, there's bikes hanging from the ceilings. There's an archive room where you could sit there for days and look at any publication that's ever been printed since the 70s. It's got 2 expandable classrooms that, we can host kids in and do things there. And then upstairs lives the headquarters for USA BMX now. And our foundation has all of its employees out of there. And then obviously USA BMX on the race side, we've got a mix of people, both in Tulsa and in Arizona, which is where the headquarters was up until this year. And then looking out your window, if you sit at that office, is a track that is Olympic level. It's got 2 starting gates. It has the 8-meter starting hill and the shorter amateur hill. We just completed a national event on it about 3 weeks ago. And that in itself, I mean, the facility has got a surface on it. It's asphalt or concrete turns. It's bleachers and heaters and everything you would dream of if you just sat down with a piece of paper and said, we want to build the best of the best. Mm-hmm. And we were able to do that. And that's, everyone looks at it and to keep in mind, this track is a covered facility. So it has a huge metal structure over it, and it's fully covered. So we can race in any element there.
Right.
And there's not many covered Supercross 8-meter starting hills in the world.
Yeah.
So we're sitting on, what is something where you got Olympic teams just thriving to come there. The phones are ringing. We're booking trainings. It's gotten pretty busy really quickly. So
that's exciting.
I spend a little bit of time there and the rest of the time here in Arizona or at an event, right? Yeah. So I'm just kind of juggling back and forth. But being there, you feel a whole new vibe of the sport. And, we're headed in a direction that's it's next level for BMX racing.
So I have a question about that facility, but I want to make sure those that obviously everybody that listens to this knows what BMX racing is, but those that might not be super familiar with the sport, before I ask this question, explain to everybody listening what that event is so that everybody really has a clear picture, like rider count, like what's the purpose of that event so that everybody understands.
Yeah. So that's our national championship. So you spend the whole year doing the national series and that's the finals. The uniqueness about it is it's not a closed race. So if you were competing in nationals all year, you're obviously up for a ranking, and your rank and finish at the Grand Nationals is going to add to your final score. But the piece that became so unique, and this really happened, I think, as we evolved in 2015, 16, 17, like right through those years, like the foreign riders that continue to come over. We have Australians, Colombians, a huge European front that comes, and it's becoming, other than the UCI World Championships, it's probably the most highly attended international event. And we're scaling, 3,000 to 4,000 unique participants racing, multiple entries over Thursday to Sunday.
What was the rider count last year?
Oh man, now you're going to test me.
But just a ballpark. If I don't need the exact, I just want everybody to understand the scale of this event. I mean, it is unimaginable how big it is.
So it was absolutely huge in terms of what happened to us last year. And it was like this rush out of COVID.
Yeah.
And we really got into this thing where we could see it growing and we could see it happening. And we're thinking, oh man, like what are we doing to ourselves? But, for the Grands itself, we had 5,471 entries.
That's insane.
Yeah. And we had, it's like 3,700 unique riders. Like, and then, what you really forget is a unique rider is just one rider, right? They come with family and they come with friends. And before you know it, you're like, man, we've got 15, 20,000 people in this building.
Right.
And, it is. And it's became a trade show too at the same time. Our Shannon Gillette in our office has just a major task on his hand every year for that, but it's became a very demanding thing where all of the bike vendors and the distributors and bike shops, like everybody wants a footprint on the floor there. And the expo square there is, I don't know the exact facts, but it's like one of only 3 or 4 like single spanning buildings. It's like more than a quarter mile long. It's crazy. So the floor space is huge. So we built a track on part of it, and the other is basically expo. And it really became to feel like, if you've been around biking and the industry, like Interbike, back when Interbike was huge and there were distributors and everyone was there. That's what's happened to this thing.
Yeah.
And it's awesome because we're putting on the biggest race. We're probably putting on the biggest, demo area, the biggest display area for new bikes and parts, and distributors are getting to come and show their brand, and you've got brands out there just showing all their new stuff and their riders. I mean, the pit space and the family atmosphere is the biggest piece of it. So
I think you pretty much answered my question without me even having to ask it, but I was curious with this new facility in Tulsa, part of, excuse my ignorance, I don't really off the top of my head know the weather in Tulsa during that time of year. You guys would never have the Grands at your new facility, right? I guess twofold: with weather, it's probably a bit cold, and it's not indoor, it's just covered, and 2, just the sheer volume of people. It's still going to be where it was at previously, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. The Grands will stay at the Expo Center in Tulsa. Our facility, while I just said how amazing it is, it would not hold something like that. Logistically, we're in an area where we've got a decent sized parking lot and things, but we don't spend miles and miles of parking.
Sure.
Like the Expos is a fairgrounds, basically. Yeah. So, they house camping and they house everything all in one stop. And we've had people from the moto industry come to our Grands, and, Chad Reed had his kids riding for a bunch of years, and he was there, and, they're looking at it like, what is this? Like, and they're amazed by it, right? Mm-hmm. It's 5-6 days. Best comparison for the moto world, and I've been to Loretta's as well, is, it's like an indoor Loretta's. Like, you just, day after day, these kids are just racing motos. Like, you start practice on Wednesday, and then they're racing Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And some of those days are 10 and 12 hours of different races throughout the day. So it's back to the pit, back to the track, back to the pit, and it's all enclosed in the same building. So it's definitely something to take in once, even no matter what kind of 2 wheels are underneath you.
Sure. Well, as we get somewhat close to the end of our time, one of the things I wanted to just talk about, because I think I see it happen, but I don't really see it being talked about a lot, and something I'd love to see would be just the two different powers that be in these different sports come together, being, you guys at USA BMX and we'll just call it the Coombs family at, MX Sports and the folks at, Racer Productions that puts on those events. Like these two sports, while they're very different, they're very, very closely intertwined, and a lot of times can be a stepping stone from somebody going from one to the other, or the other back down to the other one. And you've seen it with Chad Reed. I mean, Chad's kids are obviously racing moto a lot now, but I grew up a massive moto fan, but I never raced. A lot of people don't realize that. I've raced one race in my entire life, and it was an invitational pit bike race where like Villapoto and these guys are. I grew up racing BMX. I loved moto, and I was a massive fan of that sport, but I race BMX. And there's a lot of people that's how they find their way to moto. And there's a lot of moto people that do both, or when they get to a certain age and they're like, I don't want to risk it as much, they find a lot of joy in racing BMX, and then their kids get into it. And then you also have some really good examples like Jeremy McGrath, the greatest of, not one of the greatest of all time to ever do it in Supercross. Everybody loved his style. Well, he got that from BMX. Somebody now that we talk a lot about in moto is Christian Craig. Well, Christian Craig admittedly spent a lot of his youth racing BMX. There's just such crossover. Now you have the Stasics, and Tony Alessi's daughter is doing a lot with USA BMX and racing Stasics and things like that. What have you seen with moto guys coming to BMX, maybe some BMX guys that you watched as a kid going to moto? I know there's so much going on in your world, being that you're in the trenches. Do you see a lot of that, and just kind of what are your thoughts on those two sports running really closely to one another?
Yeah, we know we have close resemblances. I mean, most of us found a bicycle, because we couldn't afford a motorcycle,
sure,
or whatever.
Yeah, right.
When you're 5 years old and 6 years old, and that's all your parents will get you, that's what you go do.
Yeah.
And some have the dream to ride motorcycles, and some don't, and that's fine. And you see us doing that at the 3-year-old level now, right? We've had balance bikes in our system for more than a decade, and balance bikes have been the greatest stepping stone for someone as they go through those ages and the different stages that they develop, right? And you take a 3-year-old and they're on a balance bike and they're doing their thing. Well, Stasic came along, and we weren't scared of the idea, because two things are going to happen, and either way, it's a great outcome. They're going to find us first, and we have access to tracks, and we're doing our Stasic series, and tracks can allow Stasic on their facility now. So you've got 3-year-old kids now ripping around an entire BMX track, starting gate to finish line, which balance bikes we would typically run down one straightaway or two straightaways, because I have 3-year-olds, like they're not going to pump around the whole track.
Right.
But guess what? They'll get on the gate and they'll ride their Stasic all the way around the track. And you just see them do lap after lap all day. And what the greatest thing about it all, and this is why we align so well with Stasic, is we got a kid on 2 wheels. Right. That's all that really matters, right? They're balancing, they're on 2 wheels, they're riding something. They're riding a track. If when they turn 4 and they turn 5, like, they love our family atmosphere in BMX, and they love the tracks, and they love their track operator and everything about their friends they've made, they might get a regular bike and they might start competing in BMX racing. If the family or the kid had desires to ride motorcycles, they may leave and go to motorcycles, but yeah, that's not terrible in our eyes. I mean, it's someone we might not have had on the track from 3 to 5 years old. And just because you were there at 3, 4, and 5 doesn't mean you're not going to go back at 10 years old and try it again. You remembered what that's like, and you always will. And sometimes you come back to it. And I think as parents, they explore different sports, and that's good too. And then as far as like how we align on everything with motorcycles, I mean, we have so many resemblances. And just a couple of weeks ago, or a month now, probably, I spoke with Lindsay from USMCA, and our coaching stuff is like very similar to motorcycle coaching. And I think we could both learn a lot from each other. And same thing with the Coombs family, their resemblance of what they do in the moto world resembles the Anderson family so closely. I mean, we hold a publication magazine called Pull, we sanction insure tracks and racings, and
we're
doing all of the same things. Right?
Yeah.
And our foundation works with STEAM and STEM programming, and I know that MX Sports, and we've looked at Boy Scouts and some different things, and it's funny because we reflect. It's like we're still in the vortex of COVID, and before 2020, I think we had a lot of stuff like in the works to do some meetings. We were even headed to West Virginia, and then the bottom fell out, and everyone focused on what they needed to, and as we then had to open a new facility. Like we've got sidestepped on some of that stuff, but we are so quickly coming back to everything that is in our initiatives. And if people saw like the long-term goal of USA BMX and our initiatives and what we're going to accomplish, it would blow your mind. Like, it all centers around the bicycle, but it doesn't mean that it's just racing.
Right.
Our foundation and our STEM and STEAM programming is just amazing to get into schools with. And we see that avenue, and we want to share that, right? We want to put people on bicycles. There's so many people at 4 years old, like fourth grade, fifth grade, sixth grade, that they don't know how to ride a bike.
Yeah.
And it's crazy when you go out to these schools and you do track modeling or a STEM program, and you see so many kids scared to get on the bike. And so our day turns from trying to do the program we were going to do to trying to get these kids to ride a bike.
Yep.
And we're usually pretty successful and can get people around the track, maybe a few bumps and bruises in an ambulance here and there, but we usually succeed very well and get a kid riding. And that's the goal of everything that we're doing is put people on cycles.
Yeah. It's awesome, man. It's I run a mountain bike race team right now that we our series takes place at a Coombs family event at the GNCCs, where it's ATVs and motorcycles, and they have a class for these e-bikes. And between racing BMX and doing that, like there's one in particular kid that's on my team that he's 13 years old. He came from the stick and ball sport, and just really didn't resonate with how he was being treated by some of his coaches. And he found, this mountain biking sport, and it got him on two wheels. And I can already see his gears turning, like he wants more. Like he got introduced to two wheels from, electric mountain bikes from Specialized. But, I've seen his ears perk up whenever we talk about going to the BMX track, and his little brother is racing, electric mini bikes. And so it's cool to see people get pulled from the traditional stick and ball sports and see these types of two-wheeled sports. And who knows, he might, we might take him to Cumberland or South Park and Pittsburgh, and he might fall in love and be the next kid that goes to Grands. Like, it's really cool how when you get in, a lot of times you get sucked in completely. And man, a lot of that is, thanks to you and all your coworkers, all the countless hours and blood, sweat, and tears you guys put into trying to make this sport a great sport for all of us. And man, I appreciate it. It has formed me into the person that I am today, just the sport of BMX. I got involved in 2002. I would not be where I'm at today, as crazy as that sounds, if it wasn't for bicycles. Our clients are all cycling based. My work ethic was developed a lot from what I've learned from BMX and things like that. So, yeah, it's cool, man. I don't think you realize some of the opportunities you're giving kids, and probably the lessons you're teaching them, when they're 20 and 30-year-old men, that they learned when they were 6 and 7 because they had an organization like you guys to put on events. So I think it's pretty special, and I appreciate it, man, and loved having you on the show today too. Yeah,
man, thank you. And you I think our whole staff feels the same thing that you just said, right? I mean, we're here, and it's not to discredit motorcycles. I mean, I think that foundation for me was just as much as BMX racing, but and maybe in a nutshell, it's racing, right? It's the nutty thing that all of us love, which is racing, and it creates different people. Yeah. And I try to explain to a lot of our sponsors or different people that come out, hey, you're going to see 6, 7, 8-year-olds independent. They're walking around. They may go purchase something from the snack bar, and their parents aren't even around. And you go in other areas in a different sport, you're looking at a 7-year-old and their parents having to do everything for them. Right. But crazy enough, in motorcycle, Supercross, whatever it is, we'll put our kids on our plane by themselves at 7 years old because they need to get to a race. And it creates independence. And I think in that is somewhere that lies our passion, and all of us in our office know that, that's what we're doing, is we're giving these chances to kids to learn so much more. So we love doing it. We'll, our end goal every day is to service the tracks out there and make sure they have all the right tools at hand to expose more kids to the sport of BMX. And then obviously the driving mission here, our national series and everything else we have going is all stuff that we love to share with everyone. So man. Always welcome to chat more and more about this.
We'll definitely do it.
Feel like we can go on for hours and hours.
We could. This is a topic that I could do a 5-hour show on for sure. But man, it's awesome. I really always enjoyed chatting with you, and I'm excited we were finally able to get you on, and we'll try to make something happen. I'd love to do an episode where I have Davey Coombs and B.A. Anderson on, just to kind of, like you said, they're so similar, the organizations and what they've built on two different sports. I think it'd be a really, really cool episode to have both of those guys, talking about it. So we'll have offline conversations about maybe ways we can get BA on. And man, I'm grateful for your time, and we'll be talking soon.
All right, thank you.
Awesome. Thanks Cody.
For having me on.
Thank you for listening to the Moto Marketing Podcast. If your goal is to get real, measurable results from your marketing that will grow your company revenue, then check out how Impakt Media can get the same results that they have for Moto's most iconic brands by visiting thinkimpakt.com. That's THINKIMPAKT.com. Have a marketing question that you want answered on the show? Send your questions to questions@motomarketingpodcast.com. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. And we'll catch you on the next episode of the Moto Marketing Podcast.